Happy Resurrection Sunday. He arose. He arose. Hallelujah. Christ arose. You know, Christianity isn't based on a book. It's not based on a philosophy. It's not based on an idea. It's based on the historical fact that Jesus lived, he died, and he rose again. That's not just my opinion. That is an objective fact. He arose again from the grave. I'm glad that we can come together and celebrate this morning. We come together with thousands of other people celebrating today. I realize that we're online, but we are together. But I long to be together with you face to face. It reminds me of what Paul said in 1 Thessalonians. Maybe I should give you a little background, in Thessalonica. Paul came to Thessalonica with Silas. Paul and Silas came to Thessalonica, spent 3 weeks reasoning in the synagogue, and there were some conversions there. It says there were a lot of people becoming Christians, and the Jewish leaders became jealous. And so they came after the Christians. They got a mob together. They stirred up the whole city, and they came to our brother Jason's house and took our brother away to the city council and made accusations against the Christians. And Paul and Silas left through all that, and they came to Berea. Remember, the Bereans were more noble than those at Thessalonica because they studied their Bible daily to see whether the things that Paul was saying were so. Well, they began to preach in Berea, and they were given evidences, just like they did in Thessalonica, for the resurrection of Jesus. And you know what happened in Berea? Those men from Thessalonica, those Jewish leaders from Thessalonica came and stirred things up in Berea as well. So when you get to 1 Thessalonians, Paul is recounting their conversion, the Thessalonians' conversion, and talking about that. And he says something very interesting in chapter 1, verse 17. But we, brethren, having been taken away from you for a short while, in person, not in spirit, we're all the more eager with great desire to see your face. You know how we were taken away from you, but we long to see you face to face. That's how I feel this morning. We were taken away from one another through this coronavirus, but I long to see you all face to face. And for now, I guess we're going to be online. I call these my Corona sermons. They're sermons that are familiar for us. They're familiar passages to us. And they're ones that help us to learn the importance of endurance, of seeing how God is working in our lives. We are in this together, and God will see us through. I want to bring a few points from Mark, the 4th chapter this morning. I want to make 6 points that I see here in Mark, the 4th chapter. 6 brief points. But they remind us that we are in this together and that God will see us through. So Mark, the 4th chapter, beginning in verse 35. On that day, when evening came, Jesus said to them, "Let's go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd, they took him along with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with them. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so much that the boat was already filling up. Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Hush, be still." And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? How is it that you have no faith?" They became very much afraid and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" There are 6 insights I want to bring out this morning. First of all, storms come, and there is nothing you can do about it. Storms come in our life, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't stop a storm. You can't pray them away. They're going to come. I've been in 2 violent storms in my life. I say 2. How do you know there was 2 of them? Because they were, those kind of storms. The kind of storms that you go, wow, I'm sure glad I made it through that. I wasn't sure during the night whether I would even survive this storm. They were frightening, terrifying storms. And there was nothing you could do about it. And there are many storms in our life that all you can do is hold on. Hold on and ride them out. One of the main themes of the scripture is endure. Endurance. You can make it through. God will see you through it. So first of all, there are storms that come in our life and there's nothing you can do about it. And secondly, storms affect everyone. Storms affect everyone. You're not being singled out by the storm. You're not being punished because of the storm. You notice that there were other boats with them, it says. It wasn't that it was just their particular boat. It was all the boats. It was everybody who lived on the sea. Everybody who was around. It affects everyone. Some trials you must go through alone. But there are some storms that we all go through together. I think we're going through a storm together right now. And we're doing it together. And we're all in this together. So we're all in the same storm. And then the third thing I want us to note here is storms come even when Jesus is in your boat. They're not being punished. They've not been disobedient. In fact, they have been obedient. Jesus is the one who said, let's go to the other side of the sea. They were exactly doing what Jesus said when the storm came. Storms come even when Jesus is in your boat. Being a Christian doesn't exempt you from the storm. Being a Christian does not exempt you from getting cancer, from having a stroke, from having a heart attack, from having liver failure. It doesn't exempt you from anything. A little rain must fall on us all. We all are going to go through storms. People say, God must have a reason for all this. Well, you know what? Sometimes a storm is just a storm. Storms are just part of the cycle of nature. We are just part of what's going on right now. God is not punishing us. Jesus is still in the boat with us. And that's the fourth thing I want us to note. During the storm, Jesus stays in the boat with us. He didn't leave. He was there with them. He didn't go anywhere. And people ask, where is God when all this is happening? Where is he? Well, God has not left. He's still there. Reminds me of a couple some years ago riding in the pickup truck. How the old pickups had the bench seats on them. And she was sitting over there. They'd been married for about 10 years. And she was sitting over there by the window. And she looked over at him and said, dear, do you remember when we were first dating and how I used to sit right next to you while you were driving? And how I'd snuggle up to you while you were driving? Why don't we do that anymore? And he looked at her and said, I haven't moved. He's still in the same spot. God has not moved. He's still there. Maybe we've slid away from him during the storm, but he is still there. He hasn't left. And then number 5, the fifth thing I want us to note. In the storm, don't lose sight of Jesus. These disciples had been professional fishermen. They knew the sea. They knew about bad weather. They knew all about boats. But this storm was particularly scary. And it wasn't until the boat began to be swamped that they finally turned to Jesus and said, don't you care? Don't you care that we are perishing? What's going on here? They finally turned to Jesus. Maybe the storm would have been over sooner had they prayed sooner. Had they turned to Jesus sooner. Jesus could and did stop the storm. They were so busy bailing that they forgot to pray. They were so busy with life that they forgot to see that Jesus was still there in their boat. The only hope they had ignored him. You know, the humanistic philosophy says that we could do it on our own, that we have everything we need. We can do it ourselves. But occasionally, there are some storms that come in our life that just knock us on our knees. There's nothing left but to turn to God, where we should have been at the beginning of the storm. Jesus asked an interesting question. Why are you so afraid? I've often thought that was an unfair question. I mean, what do you mean, why are you so afraid? I mean, this is a fierce storm. This is a terrifying storm. They're about to lose their life. Why are we so afraid? Because we're afraid that we're going to die in all this. This is a horrific storm. It is powerful. I have reason to be afraid. And Jesus said, where's your faith? You see, faith can override our fears. And that's what Jesus wanted to point out. There's another storm I want us to briefly look at for just a moment in Matthew the 14th chapter. In Matthew the 14th chapter, beginning in verse 24, it says, but the boat was already a long distance from the land. Another time when they're crossing the sea. This time they went without Jesus. And so it says the boat was already a long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus came to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, it's a ghost! And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, take courage. It is I, do not be afraid. Peter said to him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, come. And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Peter got out of the boat. He is actually walking on the water. It says when he saw that I like some translations, they say when he saw the wind was boisterous. When he saw the waves were high. You know that those winds and the waves were the same as when he got out of the boat. Those wind was boisterous when he got out of the boat. The waves were high when he got out of the boat. He just lost his focus on Jesus. He became terrified by what was going on around him. When he was looking at Jesus, it didn't bother him, but now it does bother him. Someone said, one of the old translations said, and Peter surveying the storm. You know how we do that sometimes? We start surveying the storm. Oh, look at all that's going on around me. What if we can never get back together? What if we have to stay this way for months and months on a time? What if we all get sick? What if we all in the hospital? What we get frightened? We start surveying the storm. We start taking account. You know what? There are 2 accounts that you can make every day. There is a list over here that you can make of all the bad things happening to you. You may be sick, you may be afraid, you might be isolated, you may be all alone, you might be running low on food. There's all those bad things that are happening to you. But you know there's another list over here of all the good things that are happening to you. You have food for today, you're alive today, you have people you can call today, there's hope today. There's all these wonderful things. You see, sometimes how we're doing in life depends on which list we're looking at. Nobody's hardly ever sad, glad. How you doing today? Well, I'm terrified. Well, I'm wonderful. Never happens. Usually how we're doing that particular day depends on which list we're looking at. Peter began to look at that bad list and he began to be terrified. But when he looked at the good list of Jesus is all I need, he was able to walk on water. What an amazing thing. Don't take your eyes off Jesus. Then the 6th thing we learn. The 6th thing here is that you can learn more during one storm than you can learn in 365 clear days. In verse 41, they became very much afraid and said to one another, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? If I could, let me give you a paraphrase. Let me give you the Murphy paraphrase of that verse. After they saw what happened, they said, wow. That's what they were saying. Wow, who is this? How could this happen? You see, there are some things in life you just can't learn from a sermon. You're not going to get them from a commentary. You're not going to get them from a Bible class. There are some things in life you can only learn through the storm. It's only through the storm that you find out that God has never left you, that He is always there with you, that He'll never, never, never forsake you. You can learn a lot through one storm. Max Lucado, he calls this anvil time. C.S. Lewis calls it the megaphone of God. Philip Yancey calls it the gift that nobody wants. You see, when you're going through some time of trial, a time through suffering, when you're going through a storm, you can learn a whole lot. God can use that to teach you a whole lot about Him. And so, we're going through a big storm, no doubt about it. This can be terrifying at times, but I want you to remember, we are in this together, and that God will see us through. And I want to remind you of one other thing. There is going to come a storm in your life that is going to be so big that you're going to be taken from it. You are going to die because of that storm. Don't know what that storm might be, what that trial might be, but there's going to come one that will take your life. And that's why this day of all days is so important, to remind ourselves of the resurrection of Jesus. The reminder that we too have a resurrection to look forward to. That we have a life with God. That He's with us now and we will be with Him for eternity. We're in this together. But I long to see you face to face. But until this blows over, remember that God will see us through and we'll be together face to face once again. May God bless us all.